Everyone, wait a couple minutes for everyone to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Don't you hate the awkward silence?
Jeopardy music.
Wait, I'll give a drum beat and you give a melody just so we get the audience going. You want to do this?
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Please note that this is being recorded. Thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Jana Matthews, Director of Technical Program Management here at Foursquare. I'm pleased to be joined by Foursquare's SVP and Global Head of Product, Wade Wegner, as well as our SVP of Engineering, Jason Hudak. Before we jump in, there's a few housekeeping notes. We encourage all of you to submit questions throughout the panel through the GoToWebinar platform. We may have some time at the end for Q&A. If we don't get to any questions, we'll follow up via email as well. Yeah, follow up via email. Now, for today's panel, we're excited to share our predictions for 2024. We're going to delve into the intricate web of technological advancements for this new year. A few different topics that we'll cover. One, why quality ground truth data must be prioritized in AI, how large language models and natural language processing will accelerate data democratization, the proliferation of developer enablement and what this means for businesses, and then finally, a renewed focus on consumer privacy in an election year. Let's just start by having you all introduce yourselves. Wade.
Hi, everyone. Really appreciate you joining. Looking forward to today's conversation. So, as you know, my name is Wade, lead product here at Foursquare. And I just, for context, most of my career have been focused on building platforms, platform technology, developer tools, and so forth. So it's been really exciting to be a part of the journey here at Foursquare as we've really looked at how we can take some of the things that we do that are pretty remarkable and magical and kind of bring that platform lens and help to empower more and more customers through it. So very excited about that. Very excited to have today's conversation.
Cool. All right. I am Jason Hudak. I lead engineering, although I don't have the global head up in my title, which I just realized as I'm listening to Wade's intro. So I am a little jealous. So maybe we'll work on that. Actually, from now on, I am Jason Hudak, SVP and Global Head of Engineering for Foursquare. Very happy to be here. Joined Foursquare a little over 6 months ago. So somewhat new-ish to the geolocation and geodata space, but spent some time earlier in my career with Yahoo and the consumer platforms, which included geoinformatics, so it's not completely foreign to me. So yeah, and fun fact about Wade, Wade is the reigning dad joke champion at Foursquare. And for those of you that aren't Foursquare employees, there is a very high bar to become the reigning champion, and Wade is wearing the belt. So if you're lucky and we have enough time, maybe he'll throw out a dad joke or two.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Before we dig into different trends, let's set the stage by telling you a little bit about who Foursquare is. Foursquare is the leading industry's geospatial technology platform. We're designed to help businesses make smarter decisions and create more engaging customer experiences. We're a pioneer in geolocation space. The company's comprehensive suite of products and developer tools are used by the world's most recognizable enterprises to gain in-depth insights into locations and human mobility. Powered by our deep machine learning and privacy-first insights, Foursquare solutions are redefining how organizations derive value from location intelligence. About same time last year, we shared our top predictions for 2023 as the world's post-pandemic normal began to materialize. We shared our thoughts on the state of location intelligence, why advancements in data visualization and clean room technology were disrupting how companies approach decision making, why companies were leaning more towards low code or no code platforms, as well as other topics. Each year, we're presenting new trends that will continue to impact the state of location intelligence and beyond, and we're excited to talk about all of our predictions for you today. Let's start with our first trend. With the advancements of AI, we're seeing some increased scrutiny on the quality of ground truth data powering AI. Can you speak to your perspectives on why prioritizing quality ground truth data is so vital for AI and how businesses will look to approach this? Jason.
Sure. Yeah, I think everyone can agree that like 2023 and into 2024 is kind of the year of AI. You see it all over CNBC, all in the news, it's AI, all the things. Some of the interesting stories that I've personally been following is when some of the naivete that comes with the approach to AI around the data that's used either to train the models or even the outputs from AI. You've heard about like AI hallucinations, for example. So for those of you who are familiar, so AI hallucinations would be if AI generated responses to a question are inaccurate, nonsensical, incorrect. Often the source of that is due to the data that they're using to train these models. So outputs could be completely nonsensical, which is presented to the user, it's easy and obvious to just ignore. Or it could be something that seems completely reasonable and is presented as the truth, which could be catastrophic. So the quality of the data that you use and the scope of the data that's used in these models is extremely important. The scary thing for me is there are times when, unrelated to training data, you could get things like unintentional biases introduced in AI. Which, I mean, AI is created by humans. We all have our own biases, but you don't think about machines then emulating our biases. And a lot of that could be, a direct result of bad training data. You have situations like overfitting, meaning the statistical model that you use fits exactly against the training data. So there's basically no room for learning. And so the model starts to go awry and learn the noise of the data or makes things that are completely irrelevant and unusable. So it's the old adage like garbage in, garbage out. Similar, if you're using garbage data in, you're going to get garbage AI responses out. There's also underfitting, so similar to overfitting. In this case, you haven't used enough data or enough time to train, and so the input variables are not significant enough to determine a meaningful relationship between the input and the output. So this is where biases start to show up. You get less variance with the predictions. So like in the real world, you could imagine, you've seen all the news stories. One of them that could have been catastrophic, it was lawyers, attorneys, I don't remember if they were prosecutors or defense attorneys, using AI for legal research, were presented results with completely fake legal cases. And they used these in their arguments to establish legal precedent. And thankfully, I think it went up through multiple trials before somebody was like, hey, this actually isn't a real thing. What are you doing? So you can imagine someone could have either been convicted wrongly or set free based on AI saying this case was established as legal precedents. The others that have shown up that also are of concern, think about autonomous vehicles. If you are training these vehicles, especially on like pattern recognition or visual recognition, and they're unable to interpret like a yield or a pedestrian crosswalk sign, or that it's an actual human walking in front of your car, obviously not very good things could happen. And then you could have just the pure annoying, that you see a lot of the AI-driven travel assistance, helping you book your itinerary. Saves you a ton of time, super convenient. But if the data that's used to train that AI, generate those responses, isn't accurate, or you have like points of interest with the wrong longitude and latitude, you could end up being told to go to a hotel that has been closed for 10 years, or they recommend a restaurant, make reservations, and you find out it's not 3 miles from your hotel, it's 300 miles. And so everything from potentially catastrophic health considerations to legal considerations to just like annoying. And it really all comes back to the quality of the data that you're using to train those models. So I will stop ranting now, but
Absolutely. Wade,
Well, Jason,
curious to get your perspective.
yeah, so Jason, I'm thinking as you're talking about things my dad used to tell me quite a bit when I'd be watching television as a child, which is garbage in, garbage out. Little did I know that he was a data science scientist at heart. But I think that's just, that adage I think is even more meaningful and important to recognize today in the context of AI. Just the quality of the data that we're using is more important than ever. So I think some of the things that we've realized and we think a lot about is that a smaller, richer data set can oftentimes yield a lot more value than a larger, noisy data set. And so being able to establish that kind of ground truth and use that to help to extrapolate the signal out of the noise is really, really important, particularly when you then start to use that to try to build models to influence, much, much larger kind of insights and so forth. I did want to highlight, you covered it really well. I think this idea of bias and making sure that the more we reflect that kind of high quality ground truth helps to prevent kind of the skewing in terms of the outputs that we see from it. So I just wanted to reinforce that point that you made. I think it was really, really important. And then I'd kind of say the last piece, which I know we're going to touch on a little bit more, but even with respect to, I think, ground truth and how it's used in AI, there's another kind of non-technical aspect that I think is worth considering, which is building trust with users. And it's not even just like the customers that you're servicing, but that ground truth data, probably comes somewhere from a signal related to a human being. And it's incredibly important to make sure that, you're treating and, cultivating even that relationship so that the way with which you're interacting with that data is respectful of privacy, the regulatory environment, all those sorts of things as well. And so just suffice to say, like wrapping this up, I think, having accurate, reflective data, I think has always been an imperative, but as we move into, like you said, this new age with AI driving all sorts of opportunities for us, it's more important than ever.
Another trend that we're seeing on the rise is broader advancements with large language models and natural language processing. Can you please shed some light on how both will accelerate data democratization and how you think this is going to impact businesses and beyond? Wait.
Yeah, I'm going to pull a little bit from my background. So one of the products that I'd worked on in the past was a technology that helped to democratize how non-programmatic developers, so people who don't write code, could build applications, could build solutions. You hear a lot about the heroes within different departments who are able to do really complex things with Excel or other tools and really create pretty amazing solutions on top of it. So I've always been personally really fascinated about being able to reduce the complexity of any kind of system to increase the number of people that can, interact with it. And so I think LLMs and NLP provide, there's a lot of opportunity here in terms of democratization. So for instance, the number of people in the world who can, for instance, think about how to construct a SQL statement and to then execute a query against a database. While there are many more who aren't as comfortable necessarily writing that. And so, even one application that we're seeing and I think is very exciting is being able to enable people who really understand their domains, like data analysts, business people, who can then ask questions. So again, natural language, ask for what you want, and have a system that is smart enough to translate that into a structured query that can be executed against the database is really powerful. And I think what that does is it lowers the barrier of entry with respect to who ends up being able to get access to data. And I think, this ability to get directly to data to derive insights and so forth is going to be an incredibly empowering thing. I think a consequence of this is going to end up being that it's going to accelerate the pace with which we see experimentation in some cases, like innovative approaches being brought to bear, because we're, again, reducing the barrier of entry so that really smart people who just may not have a skill set that is required to bridge the gap to where they need to go, they're no longer dependent on other human beings perhaps to be there to facilitate. And so I think it's just going to unlock potential that has always been there, but maybe restricted a little bit in terms of its ability to flourish because of the nature of how hard it has been to get what they need. And so I'm really excited to see kind of the acceleration around experimentation, innovation, and so forth. I will say that another thing that is very exciting to me is, and we've even seen this internally as we have thought about how we make it easier to get access to the massive amounts of documents and data that is stored, is as soon as you change the barrier of entry with respect to how people can interact with the data, it starts to make it so much more apparent how important it is that data is available to everyone. So it really reinforces like having a data warehousing strategy, a BI strategy, so that data isn't siloed within organizations. And I think as soon as you couple the lack of siloed data along with then NLP, LLMs, things that make it easier to connect to all of these different places that data exists, the ability for people to then go discover the information they need is just remarkable. And so I think that also reinforces this kind of experimentation perspective, but even more so, I think what it does is it kind of fuels this idea of continuous innovation. And for those of us within like the product and engineering worlds, we talk a lot about continuous innovation. And what is exciting to me, again, going back to this idea of democratizing access to it, is I think it also expands the ways with which continuous innovation can now be something done by people outside of even product and engineering. Like it really opens the, reduces the barriers and makes it easier for everyone to participate in this. I guess maybe the last point I'll make, and then Jason would love to get your take on this, is I think that what it will really end up doing is it'll change even at like, who knows, like leadership, executive leadership, board level, the perspective of like how important this idea of not just having data, but like increasing data literacy and data access is going to end up being. And I really think that you'll see a lot of a renewed focus on making sure that companies are investing in things that maybe in the past have been easier to ignore, and because it's going to be seen as a strategic accelerant for unlocking innovation and a whole bunch of other things. And so I'll stop there, and Jason would love your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, we both, so Wade and I have worked together now at a number of companies, and most of these have been kind of developer first companies. As we've progressed through the years, you start hearing more and more things like, everyone can be a builder. We're now getting to the point where it's not as having to build these, abstractions that mask all of the underlying complexity. AI, you can just answer, it can answer questions for you. So you think about, like, as we're talking about all of this data, being on the engineering side, I'm literally picturing the architectural diagram of, graph database, data warehouse, data lake, all the underlying storage and all the services. And then to Wade's previous point, you have to have people that understand how to extract insights from those. With natural language processing and these LLMs, you can imagine actually even today being able to ask in normal language these systems things like, we have the Olympics coming up, for example. I'm a marketer and I'm sponsoring the Olympics. I want to know, people's behaviors that have been exposed to the ads that I've shown them, whether it's at the venue or coming in. And so you got, movement data, you've got advertising technology, you've got points of interest, the actual geolocation, all of these complex services to try and build a story of like what a user did, what their behavior was based on something they were exposed to. You can imagine being an advertiser, I've got to go and talk to either a data engineer or a data scientist or an analyst to say like, hey, can you build a report? Very soon, even today, some of these technologies, you can say, show me, tell me, if you can explain, what data insights you're trying to extract in a normal language and not a technical language. It does start to make the everyone is a builder capability. You can produce, overlay with these incredible visualization technologies, and all of a sudden, you basically got an engineering team, a product team, a data science team, and a design team in a text prompt at your fingertips. So I think it's very exciting time. I see, the pace of technology innovation, the pace of change that AI is going to drive is, I don't know that anybody can measure it, because it's like every day there's some new thing. And I think when you open up like everyone is a builder, the thing that I'm personally excited about is you get perspectives from folks that aren't in product engineering. You get perspective from folks that are in these different disciplines where they've got amazing ideas. They may not have the technical skills to bring those into life, but other people do, and you put them in these technologies, and all of a sudden they truly are builders. So from that perspective, I think it's an exciting time to be in technology.
Absolutely. Quick reminder for everyone, please continue to submit your questions through the platform. We will get to as many of them as we can at the end of this. So it's obvious from this discussion, AI has a huge impact and power to affect teams across the whole organization, particularly engineering. We're seeing AI-driven tools and services simplify how developers work and the ability to improve delivery and quality of their software. Jason, would you be able to elaborate on how the developer experience, how you see it evolving in the coming year, and really why developer enablement is becoming so important?
Yeah, you can think, so I've been in this industry probably a lot longer than I care to admit, probably longer than some of these folks that have joined have been on the planet, unfortunately, or fortunately. I've led a good life. I'm not embarrassed. Anyways, coming through, I started in technology in the late 90s. And then, you see things like the advancements in continuous integration and continuous deployment, the DevOps tool set. Throughout the last, call it 25 years, a lot of the emphasis has been on giving engineers the tools they need to be successful without having other humans as, intentional or unintentional gatekeepers. And it's great, and it's been amazing. The thing that has been really challenging that many of us have experienced personally is the cognitive load that puts on the average engineer. In a DevOps culture, and I'll refer to DevOps as a culture, if you're an engineer, you build it, you test it, you deploy it, you instrument it, you get paged for it when it breaks. When I started, those were 5 different teams at least in that cycle. Now it's a given engineer. Well, to do that, you've got to be able to be a subject matter expert on a wide array of tools and a massive amount of information. With AI, it makes a lot of this information something that you don't have to store up here in your memory. You can store it in AWS memory. So when you connect, we've got a number of work streams going today for AI-driven developer enablement. So connecting things like communications mediums, so whether it's Slack or email, G Suite, Atlassian, PagerDuty, you name it. You don't have to keep all of that information in your head or track down like the one person at the company that might have it. We have a guy here called Vikram. We call him Vikram GPT because he's like the guy that can somehow keep all that stuff in his brain. Most mortals cannot. Thankfully, AI lessens our dependence on Vikram GPT and puts all of that knowledge, all that context into the hands of developers like immediately. So you can think of, we've all onboarded to a new company. And depending on, I've spent a lot of time in startups. You join a startup, let's just say like internal documentation is not always the highest priority for a startup. So onboarding to a new startup is often pretty painful because you're spelunking GitHub. You're looking into repos, you're trying to understand the code. There's interesting observations. You're like, I don't understand what that does. And then you got to go find somebody and like, hey, tell me what this does. With AI, you can point it at a repo and say, explain this to me, and you're going to get a nice summary. Or in the rare cases where you've got someone who's super passionate about documentation and they have created 11 billion pages in exhausting detail. I don't always have the time to read 11 billion pages, so with AI, I can literally copy pasta and say, give me a summary, and in milliseconds, I've got it, and knowledge is acquired. I think another area we look at, especially folks that have been in engineering world for a while, you will eventually have to refactor or rebuild in a different software language. It's a pretty daunting task. It's especially the more complex systems you have, the larger scale, it can seem like an overwhelming mountain to climb. With AI, we've got the ability for co-pilots to help reduce the time for a lot of these activities. So, we're not quite to the point where I can say, like, go look at this repo and transform from this language to this language and I'm done. But a lot of these activities, we're talking 70 to 80% of the time normally spent is handled by the machines, and the other time is really us custom crafting this to make it relevant, to make sure that we've got the right business logic in, the right controls, and really short circuits a lot of the pushback on why we can't do a thing because of time. So it's very exciting for me that there's always the natural tension in product and engineering for new features and then operational maturity. And balancing that in the past, some of these operational maturity related tasks can be huge time sucks, like multi-months or quarters or even year-long efforts. Like I said, with AI, if you can cut that time by even 30%, 40%, up to 80%, then the flexibility that you gain to keep your infrastructure modern, keep your code base secure, keep the business logic and the features that your customers want all flowing at a very high rate is all of a sudden it's achievable. So, yeah, sorry.
Oh, good. Wade,
And
what are your thoughts?
the thing that excites me most about this is I'm pretty sure Jason's saying that engineering efficiency and productivity over the next few months is going to increase at least 200 to 300%. Is that right, Jason?
I'm playing this back, and I guarantee those words never came out of my mouth. Just saying.
Well, all right. Well, that was my takeaway, anyways.
Of course.
I actually, so this is a topic I care a lot about. It's been something near and dear to me for a long time. Not necessarily the AI piece to it, but just developer experience in general. And so I have a bunch of thoughts that I want to kind of walk through real quick. Some of which Jason covered, but I'll just kind of enumerate them. I think I've even experienced firsthand, like sometimes I'll close my eyes and pretend I'm still a developer at heart and not a product manager. But I have seen the role that, like as Jason mentioned, these co-pilots, like how quickly you can go from an idea to a proof of concept. Like we're talking, instead of it being weeks and days, like we're talking hours. It's remarkable how quickly you can have an idea and see something manifest related to it. So incredibly empowering. I think the hype around AI has also been remarkable in terms of how it's changed even like executive conversations where CEOs who probably never cared about developer experience at all are suddenly asking questions like, how can we do this to make our teams more productive? And that is fantastic because it's not only, I think, a good thing to ask, but it also introduces opportunities for folks like Jason and I to then add on like, oh yeah, and this is why developer experience is so incredible. And it just changes conversations like that a little bit. Jason talked about like cognitive load for an engineer. And I think that you just think about like how many developers and engineers in the world have inherited a code base they didn't write. And that is one of the hardest things ever, I think, to deal with, is to try to understand the code, the soup that exists there. And this is a great application of, again, that co-pilot reducing the cognitive load, because as Jason said, we're not all Vikram GPTs, but AI can hold literally every line of code in memory and help you make sense of a lot of that. And so really, really powerful there. And then maybe just the last thing that I get excited about here as well is the opportunities with respect to QA, testing, performance testing, integration testing. Like AI also helps some of the, we think a lot about just building a new feature. We don't always think about maintaining it for years and decades to come. And this is a great place. Well, Jason does. I don't. I'm just kidding. But seriously, like the application of this from a developer experience perspective as well, to reduce some of the the writing tests and unit tests and establishing these sorts of things to protect us over time is not always the first priority of product managers or even maybe sometimes the developers and engineers. And so this is a great way to think about applying this kind of technology to just increase the supportability, the durability of the software we build over time. So it's a really, really, Jason said, it's an exciting time to see what we do with this.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit to our last trend. I don't know if you guys know this, it's an election year. Yeah, crazy, right? But so I'm curious if you could share your perspective on renewed focus in consumer privacy, particularly during an election year, and for 2024, kind of any insights or predictions on what the privacy landscape might look like.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. Let me share maybe a few thoughts. I think it's, even the structure of the question is maybe a little. It's like we shouldn't only care about privacy and consumer trust and everything in election years, but the reality is, we have a very political environment, and this stuff becomes topics for many different reasons. I will not go there, but that aside, a few thoughts here. I think any company not looking at an election year as a better opportunity to get proactive about privacy controls around the ways that you're protecting customer data and so forth is maybe missing a nice opportunity to provide some extra incentive to go and do this. Companies that are not, I think, proactive with respect to how they think about this are going to be the ones that struggle when things go sideways. And that reactive mode that you end up getting in is a way more costly one for many, many reasons. So I think an election year and the conversations that come with this is a great opportunity to just look. If you're trying to make a case that you need to make more investments in this area, take advantage of that and use that as leverage, because I think that's going to be very important. We've definitely seen, I think, for the last several years and so forth, that there is more and more of a, I think rightly so, a focus on consumer rights and around how companies treat consumer data, what they do with it, and so forth. And so I will again say that the more proactive you are, irrespective of election year, with respect to how you approach this, the better. And while there's no guarantees in life, or maybe some, but mostly no guarantees, pretty confident when I say that the companies that thrive in years to come are going to be the ones that were very proactive and very serious with respect to how they thought about putting, customer and consumer rights at the forefront. And again, it's great to be aware of this in the context of an election year, but it shouldn't necessarily, only be focused there. I think a big thing for me is when you think about how to affect change here and to do the right things, I think it has to start with culture first. And so as you think about any of these topics, I think rather than necessarily starting with this, we have to do these sorts of things, I think a really valuable thing to do is to focus first on why this matters and why it is an important element of the company culture. Because the more that you make it a part of the culture, I think the more that people automatically end up making choices that end up protecting consumer interests and so on and so forth. And again, that ends up helping, I think, companies to be a lot more proactive and a lot more just honestly, like will thrive more in years to come. So yeah, my thoughts on this, again, it shouldn't be something that only matters in the context of an election year, but again, I will highlight the more you can take advantage of the fact that these are conversations happening around, around the country and around the world as well, the more opportunities you'll have to, try to do the right things.
I think there are now three new constants. It used to just be death and taxes. Now it's death, taxes, and data privacy and consumer legislation or consumer privacy legislation.
It just rolls off the tongue, Jason.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. I won't try and say that again. So after joining Foursquare, the thing that one of the first things I observed is the way you talked about culture. The culture here is what I would describe as, call it privacy forward. I'll never say like security first, privacy first, op first, but very privacy forward. Thing that was refreshing is like it is kind of woven into the culture. Like we want to be a leader in this industry around topics like data privacy. And so we invest, I'm actually pleasantly surprised, like invest really heavily across like whether it's legal, product engineering, marketing, you name it. This is top of mind for everyone. And you got to make sure that I always talk about, you got to treat your software like you would your kids. You really have to treat your data like your children. Like you're not going to send your kids to school barefoot and hungry. We can't send our data products to customers without ensuring that everything from our retention policies, fair use policies, all of this is defined, instrumented, actioned, and then more importantly, continuously updated. Like this landscape is evolving as quickly as the technology landscape, and the complexity is just going up and up and up. And, you look at it there. Initially, it was all right. We have GDPR. That was the big kind of the shot across the bow that gave us all like, okay, this is coming. And then you get state-by-state legislation, and some of these states have very different rules about what is forbidden and what is not. The legalese can be overly broad for some interpretations or completely ambiguous for others. And so staying on top of this, to Wade's point, could be one of the ways that companies differentiate themselves from their competition. Lastly, I'll say that kind of on that front, this is the topic that I don't think anyone can take lightly. We've all seen the news, what happens when data is exfiltrated, what happens when companies are not honoring consumer rights and not honoring things like opt-outs. Waiting to invest in this, you're basically, unlike kicking the can on tech debt, something that is relatively straightforward to come back and address, playing catch up for data protection and data privacy and consumer rights, it would be overwhelming if you get behind that curve. So my pro tip to everyone that is either new to this or thinking about this is don't wait to invest. Like this is an area similar to information security or application security that if you get it wrong, it can go sideways for you really fast. So not something that we can take lightly.
Absolutely. All right, we have a few minutes for Q&A. So let's go through a few different questions. This first question is for Jason. This person says, I've been hearing a lot about different graph technologies, such as knowledge graphs and others. How does Foursquare think about graph tech in the geospatial world?
Yeah, this is super relevant for us because we've implemented graph technology. So obviously Foursquare, geolocation industry. I came from a not geolocation industry for the past 2 jobs, and so I'm used to more traditional data warehouse, data lake, databases. Coming here, one of the first observations was like, those technologies weren't necessarily purpose-built for geolocation data. They could be familiar with like latitude, longitude, much different than like a column with names and a column with addresses. And so the graph technology that we're employing is to bring the power of these underlying data technologies, but make it applicable to our business, to the geoinformation space. And so the graph enables us to get faster time to insights. So you can do really interesting joins with geospatial data and non-geospatial data to derive insights, and do it in a fraction of the time and for a fraction of the cost through kind of more traditional data warehousing technologies. So it's we're kind of early in the journey for this, but so far it's been pretty encouraging. And then looking at talk about AI, we're now imagining putting an AI interface on top of that, and have the Ask Wade product. So Wade, how do I do this? And then leveraging the data that's in our graph, immediately produce those results or beautiful visualizations, whatever it is that you want to ask Wade to do. In the meantime, before that's available, Wade@Foursquare.com, just ask him whatever you want him to build. He'll come to me and ask, and I'll say no, and then we'll argue, and eventually it'll get built because Wade's a very convincing debater.
This is an attempt to distract me from the fact that you committed to 2x and 3x productivity, so it's not working.
Wade also is highly intelligent, and yes, you are correct, sir.
Okay, our next question is for you, Wade. Are there any innovations that you can preview that we can expect to see from Foursquare in 2024?
Yeah, so a few things. So kind of top of mind, actually, because Jason was talking a little bit about the graph. One of the things that we're looking at, and honestly, this exists even in the context of democratization, is, traditionally, again, most of the insight that we've provided had been through the kinds of data that related to places in the world and how people interact with those places. And so taking advantage of the graph, one of the things that we're excited to do is kind of lower the barrier of entry with respect to who can get these valuable insights, and to provide more of a, dare I say, like an easier UI on top of it that lets you get directly connected to it, where you might just care about like foot traffic relative to a particular, zip code over a period of time. And rather than having to, work with a, collection like of data scientists and engineers and analysts in order to get those answers, come to Foursquare and be able to do so. So very excited about those kinds of insights, again, in the realm of democratization. I think the graph is an interesting one as well, where we've made some decisions in terms of how we've designed it, where it's not just able to interact with the data that Foursquare uniquely is able to provide to our customers, but even leverage that graph technology in the context of our customers' data as well, where I won't get into like the details because I'm not as familiar with that, but where we can do so in a very privacy forward way, where customers retain their data, we don't access it, yet they can take advantage of all the advantages that Jason had talked about, where their data can be joined in many different ways to produce insights that independently may not be possible. So that's very exciting. And then I guess just I'll say, like, many of you probably know Foursquare as the company that created the social check-in app, and we still have a lot of these applications in market, which is very cool. And certainly, like, I have my own personal stories that go back a decade or so with related to this, and we are actually also working on some pretty exciting things related to how we enable people to experience the world. So pretty neat stuff. So thanks for the question.
Absolutely. All right, we have time for one last question. Would love to get both of y'all's perspective on this. What are some examples that we can share of companies that are currently using Foursquare's tech?
Oh, that's a good one. All right, this may be a bit of a softball, but this is the one that always comes to mind right away for me, and that is Uber. And I think it's pretty easy to see like the application, particularly of our places data in the context of Uber. I'm actually visiting here in San Francisco right now and have taken an Uber multiple times to get to where I want to go. And just, being able to help Uber, connect a point of interest by name to an address to a lat long, like that, it's a clear and very, I think, easy to understand use case that's really awesome that we can help provide and support them with. I think what's also interesting there is we're working with Uber around one of their more beta capabilities, so Uber Explore. And that goes beyond even just more of the standard POI data that you might think about, like, venue name, address, things like that, and gets more to this kind of rich metadata that surrounds places. What are the things that are unique about this place? Like, what are the kinds of experiences that you can have, even to the degree to which user-generated data around reviews and kind of things that people experienced end up helping then a customer of Uber to, have a better experience when they're trying to explore a place. And I wish I had time to take advantage of that and wasn't just working down here in SF, but like having that kind of rich metadata to help describe a place, I think is a really neat use case and one that I love seeing Uber use.
Yeah, I think you said places, so that Nextdoor is I think everyone knows, it's a social community application. Nextdoor uses Foursquare's places database to ensure the validity and accuracy for new businesses. So as their merchants onboard to Nextdoor, they use places to verify that the business in real time is registered accurately, that some of the metadata that we're referring to, like your open close hours, your where is the front door, has to be accurate, because if Nextdoor is going to present this information to users, well, there's a real easy way to erode trust with users and then present them with information that is inaccurate. So our partnership with Nextdoor helps them adhere to kind of their high trust and compliance standards, especially as they move into new markets. They move into a new market, they get new merchants that are onboarding. It's very important for them to be able to, in real time, introduce these to their platform and expose them to their customers with high confidence. And so that's another fun use case with Places data set.
Okay, well, thank you both. That's all the time we have for today. If we didn't get to a submitted question, we will be sure to follow up via email. We'll also be sending you a recording of today's session. Thanks again for everyone who was able to join us, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next virtual event.
Bye.